Can designers survive in 2024 without a social media presence? I guess it depends who you are. Um, for example, if we take The Row as an example, now The Row has a social media presence in the sense that like they have an Instagram page, they have all these things, but The Row doesn't really post a lot of their fashion on their Instagram page. They just post like artwork and furniture that they like. But the reason why The Row can get away with it is because the Olsen twins are famous as fuck. So even though they're not relying on social media, if the people that run the brand are famous as shit, therefore their friends that wear the brand are famous as shit, they can kind of bypass all of that. If you're not in that situation, which is most of us, then you kind of need a social media presence in some sense if you want to survive as a brand. I don't see how a new brand, unless you're a celebrity or you have celebrity friends that can endorse your brand without you having to build an audience through social media. I don't see how that could be viable in any way, to be honest. But it also depends how big you want to be. I know a lot of companies, like in Japan, you'd see like a lot of these places that just specialize in denim, like in some random corner in Japan. And you go there and it's the best denim you've ever seen. And these brands have no social media, but because people in that area know that that's the place to go for really good denim and really high quality denim, what tends to happen is people just end up flocking there. And essentially, those brands can make enough money where they're kind of satisfied and they don't need to end up going on social media, trying to make more money. They're content. If you're trying to build, I don't know, $1 million business or $1 billion business, then you definitely need social media. If you want that kind of like, I'm trying to sell to LVMH growth, you definitely need social media. How do I get into fashion styling without going to school for it? So funny enough, I feel like most stylists don't go to school for styling, to be honest. I think styling is kind of one of those aspects of fashion where it's who you know. It's not necessarily how good you are or going to fashion school or having a degree. The degree helps because you're around designers, you're around other creatives that have a network that you can sort of tap into. And also the degree would open other separate opportunities. But if you're not going to fashion school, you just need to go to like events where a lot of fashion people are and tell people you're a stylist. I have friends who didn't study styling in school and they're really big stylists. I won't mention their names because they didn't ask to be mentioned, but they just go to fashion events, they meet people, they talk to people, they're like, oh, I'm a stylist, da, da, da. Before you know, they have that person like, oh, you're a stylist. I have this campaign. I would love to hire you for this campaign. Let me see some of your work. Oh, and then before you know it, these friends are making a really good living just styling. I think you just need to be, if you're going to be a fashion stylist, you just need to be very sociable. You need to go to a lot of events. You need to meet people. You need to build a strong network. That's the best way to get into styling. But I don't even think that's one of the industries where less so you need a fashion degree or you need to go to fashion school for. What do you think of menswear writer Derek Guy? Shout out to Derek. I like Derek Guy. I think he's really funny. I'll put him on the screen so people can see who we're talking about. It's this guy on Twitter called Die Workwear. I don't actually know Angband, if that's how to say your name. I don't know what his background is, to be honest. I probably need to do more research on him. I just know him because of his tweets. But I think that he is obviously really knowledgeable about menswear. But I find it funny because I don't necessarily agree with everything he says. I think he has a very my opinion or no opinion way of talking about things, but I think he does that deliberately to be like funny and witty, which is why I find him really hilarious. I do like his sense of humor. He will say something like quarter zips on men look atrocious, or this kind of jacket on men looks stupid, and people people are up in arms on Twitter. I find that stuff really, really funny. How people get so riled up over those things. But I'm a big fan of his. I think he makes really quality content. On Twitter, that's as high quality content as you can get on Twitter because, of course, one of the limiting factors on Twitter is the text limit. So you can't really say a lot of things, but he is really detailed. And I actually learn a lot reading his tweets every day. So I definitely enjoy his Twitter, and I would say I'm a big fan. Is the industry due for a collapse due to decreasing profit margins, vanishing methods of cost cutting from manufacturers, and shrinking exploitation pools? Oh, that's a really good question. I feel like this is something that I talk about all the time, right? The fact that there's only so far that fashion can go before everything kind of collapses on itself. This is something that I talk about all the time, damn near. Recently, of course, we saw the performance from LVMH. We saw the really bad performance from Kering. A lot of brands, their Q3 reports weren't very favorable. Of course, you have brands here and there that have had a good spell, but there was this really good article I was reading via BOF. I'll put it on the screen now, that is titled LVMH Results Spell Trouble for Luxury Sector. And essentially, the question you're asking, a lot of the answers are in here in terms of the shift in luxury spending, the fact that because of what's happening in China, there's a smaller customer base for brands in the short term and whether they can change that in the long term. These kind of things. Also, it's just, I feel like for a lot of these luxury brands, they've exhausted any market possible. Not all of them, of course, because we're still seeing a brand like Louis Vuitton make more than 20 billion in annual revenue, which is insane, by the way. But I just feel like all of them are going to get to a certain point where quite literally every single person that could buy a luxury product buys a luxury product, and there's no more growth to be had. These brands have seen so much insane growth over the years, and I think it's very unrealistic to just expect that they're going to continue growing to infinity and beyond. I just don't think that's a reality. And so a lot of the growth for a lot of these brands will slow down. Of course, we've seen Burberry really struggling. We've seen Gucci really struggling. I think that will happen for the foreseeable future. I also think that this idea and these brands that have all decided now that they're all going to jack their prices by insane amounts, I don't know how I feel about that. I think eventually that's going to plateau, and I think a lot of brands are going to end up having to invest a lot more in products on the lower end of the market where people can actually afford the stuff. This is a good thing that I saw on BOF's Instagram page of how luxury brands have increased their prices dramatically since 2019. So you have the Prada Galleria bag, which has literally increased by 117% between 2019 and 2024, which to me, insane. Absolutely insane. The Chanel flat bag, the large one, has increased by 91% between 2019 and 2024. One of the reasons, and I've done a whole live stream about this, definitely check it out if you haven't seen it, because I went into great detail. In the Burberry Live, we talk about the fact that one of the big mistakes that Burberry made was thinking that they are Hermes or thinking that they are Bottega Veneta. And they kind of made that mistake because they hired Daniel Lee. So I don't know what the CEO was thinking, but maybe they were thinking, well, we're bringing the person that, brought Daniel Lee. We're bringing Daniel Lee, who was the person that brought Bottega Veneta to the masses. So in a sense, because of the success that he had at Bottega, maybe we can replicate that. But Bottega and Burberry as brands are completely different. Their customer bases are completely different. The Burberry customer is not used to spending the amount of money that the Bottega customer spends. It's just a completely different sector in fashion. And so to think that you're just going to bring one creative director and magically, by some form of magic, he's going to make Burberry the new Bottega just didn't make any sense. And so I think that this whole hiking of prices thing is going to lead to the downfall for a lot of luxury brands. So yeah, that's my thoughts on that. This YouTube channel runs on your support. If you want to support the channel, you can subscribe to my Patreon. You'll gain access to exclusive content that includes everything from my Patreon podcast, where I give a behind the scenes insight into the fashion industry, as well as a fashion book club where I review my favorite fashion books. You can also check out my fashion ebook, which highlights the best fashion journalists to follow, definitions of common fashion terminology, and how to determine what a good source of fashion information is. The links to everything are in the description below.